Do you guys see my screen?
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you so much. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear beloved brothers and sisters, I pray you and your families are well. Always honored to be with you all. Thank you so much for joining us in this joint journey into the sacred path of Futuwwah. This is our 13th study circle and reading session, and it's been such a blessing and joy to share this space and place with all of you, dear beloved brothers and sisters. Thank you so much for your inputs, for your reflections, and for your contributions to make this study circle as beneficial as possible for all of us who are interested in the sacred path of Futuwwah. As always, I want to ask you all to always be active in our discussions today. Your inputs and reflections are very valuable, and we learn so much by sharing each other's inputs and each other's interpretations of the chapters that we're reading. I want to thank Imam Dawud Walid for the amazing work he has done in this book, writing this book as a way for us to ground ourselves in the sacred tradition of Futuwwah. I also want to thank all of our scholars in the past and also all of our scholars in the contemporary era who are fighting for the normalization of Futuwwah all over the world. And also, this is sacred knowledge from the prophetic path. So all praise goes to our predecessors, of course, all the Anbiya, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and everything here is sources that comes directly from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as well. A lot of it at least comes from the Holy Quran. So we ask Allah to accept our gathering. I also want to thank my beloved colleagues, Sister Fatima, Brother Shoaib, Sister Dania, Sister Mediha, Brother Rahil, and the rest of the Futuwwah Academy of Sacred Manhood and Sacred Womanhood, and the ISIP, the International Students of Islamic Psychology team, for the amazing work they're doing and contributing to facilitate all of our initiatives, including this Futuwwah Academy Study Circle. All right. Today's chapter is a very important chapter, dear brothers and sisters. It's about one of the biggest dilemma in our modern contemporary era, which is how to restrain from sexual desires. And we know that a lot of the fitna in society generally comes from this very, anthropocentric dimensions of quote to quote living out your sexuality and your desires, which has created a lot of havoc and a lot of distortion and a lot of corruption in many societies that has made a lot of men and women go astray, unfortunately. So hopefully through this chapter we can learn how can we work with these topics and themes from the aspect of Futuwwah, inshallah. So this quote is a prophetic quote, and we start there. No man is alone with a woman except that Shaitan is the third present, and we will reflect upon this quote during our reading session today. All right. Who would like to start the reading, dear brothers and sisters? Yes, Sister Hadid, you would like to start to read?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Bismillah. The fata entering upon the path must also be vigilant in restraining his desires. For his four enemies are his ego, his desires, shaitan, and the world. His daily struggle, jihad, against his sexual desires is the greatest of struggles, often requiring more discipline than that of soldiers standing in straight ranks, following the commands of their commander. In Surah Al-Hajj, verse 78, Allah Azza wa Jal commands this struggle, saying, and struggle for Allah as is his due. Ibn al-Mubarak commented on this verse, explaining that it means the struggle against the self and the desires. Additionally, Ar-Raghib al-Asfahani radiallahu anhu said, the desire, shahwa, which is not inherently vain, is the longing of the self towards what it seeks.
Let's pause there, sister. Thank you so much, Sister Hadid, for your excellent reading. I really appreciate it. Here is something very interesting, actually, and I would like us to reflect upon this, because what Raghib al-Isfahani is saying here is that the struggle right here, so desire shahwa, which is not inherently vain, is the longing of the self towards what it seeks. The longing of itself towards what it seeks. So I would like us to expand on that a little bit. And maybe we can bring some examples of when one can lose oneself towards what one seek. For example, what if what you seek governs you instead that you govern what you seek? You see what I'm saying? That what you seek controls you rather than you controlling what you seek. Any reflections on this, dear sisters and brothers? Yes, Sister Hadid, go ahead.
Yeah, I think nowadays that we have all of this social media, and I think يعني committing sins or being like having these sexual desires being hyper, it's much easier than it used to be before, and everything is easy. Anybody can do anything and nobody knows about it. So I think this is very toxic and very dangerous what we are having here in our يعني days, and we need to like start this awareness for our kids from a very young age, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Thank you so much for sharing your reflections, dear Sister Hadid. I really appreciate it. I think also here it's about impulse control in a sense, you know. It's nothing wrong to, seek things in life according to Quran and Sunnah, obviously. But when these material object or actions that are dunyawi actions uh, are only done for the sake of the nafs, uh, and that it controls you and it defines you rather you defining it, then it can be very problematic and it can lead to addiction, for instance, right? And also that dunyavi things can always be ukhravi things. We can always gain spiritual, aspects of all dunyavi things if we're doing it with the right intention and according to Sharia. And if it's not done with right intention and not done according to Sharia, then obviously that will be something that will not bring us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Quite the opposite, unfortunately. That is the case. So yeah, I think it's an important topic. Also here we see that the fatah entering upon the path must be vigilant in restraining his desires. So the four enemies that he has is what? His ego, the nafs, his desires, shahawat, shaitan, and the world. Now, how can we make these enemies to your friends? How can we make these four enemies into our four friends and companions? How can the nafs become your companion? How can your desires not to become your companion, rather not to govern you and to become something else? And shaitan will never be your companion. So that we can take away. How can we use the world as a good place rather than as a wicked place? Any thoughts about that? Yes, Brother Thomas, go ahead. You can unmute yourself, brother.
Yes, if you use those things to guide you back to Allah, then they become friends.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's about the intention. So the nafs can ultimately come to the state of nafs al-mutma'ina through proper spiritual practices, right? As Brother Thomas refers to, if you do it with the right intention. Your desires, if you tame them, then they can be healthy aspects of, for instance, if it comes to your sexual desires, if it's according to Quran and Sunnah in the aspect of marriage, then it can become something of a virtue. For instance, procreation is a virtue. Shaitan, obviously, if you fight shaitan, then you're doing jihad al-nafs, which is a virtue. And finally, the world is actually a place where you are here to seek, rewards from Allah through your struggle and your suluk and your spiritual wayfaring. So it's about perhaps reflecting upon that your enemies can become indirectly your partner if you combat them in a proper way. That actually you go to the opposite direction instead of the direction that your enemies want you to go to. Sister Anum is saying, Al-Isfahani says the self-desires which are not inherently vain, meaning the same nafs which takes to destruction, can also call towards piety and success if it's tamed. Yes, exactly, sister. We have the agency to do so at the end of the day. MashaAllah, Sister Anum. Amazing remarks. Thank you so much. All right, let's continue the reading. Who would like to read? All right, Brother Thomas, go ahead.
To reiterate, the greatest of the desires that the Fatah must struggle to restrain is his sexual desires. This has become an even greater struggle for our generation compared to the generation of our pious predecessors. As societies in the West are much more overtly sexualized in uncountable ways. Grappling with such desires is not new, however, as described in Surah Al-Imran, verse 14. Alluring to man is the love of desires for woman, having children, vast amounts of gold and silver, fine horses, cattle, and fertile land. These are pleasures of the worldly life, but Allah, with him, is the best destination.
Jazakallah khairan, Brother Thomas, for reading in such a beautiful way. Thank you so much. So here, it's important to reflect a little bit here as well, because when Imam Dawud is saying that the greatest of the desires that the Fatah must hold is to restrain his sexual desire, and that this has become an even greater struggle for our generation compared to the generations of our pious predecessors, right? And this is due to the fact that the societies in the West are much more overtly sexualized, right? In so many different ways, like through popular culture, through education systems, etc. So what can we learn from our pious predecessors, dear brothers and sisters? What can we learn from them? And the ways that they dealt with these struggles, both privately and publicly. What can we learn from them? Feel free to share anecdotes as well if you have any anecdotes. What can we learn from them? Yes, Sister Shifa, go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Walaikum salam.
I just wanted to add what Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah mentions in his Kitab al-Fawaid. He basically says that this concept of shahwa originates from having an inner dialogue or an inner thought, which he terms as khatira. And he says that when you do not stop this khatira, that inner dialogue, that inner thought that's happening inside the mind, the emotion basically gets encouraged, and then you have the cognitive strength to actually go and commit that action. So what he says is that drive that is being developing inside of a person, for the matter here inside a fatah, should be stopped or neutralized at that specific point of time. So
MashaAllah.
yeah, I think I really liked the way Ibn al-Qayyim's rahmallah's approach is towards this aspect of shahwa. So it's a must read for people.
Yeah, Ibn al-Qayyim is amazing. I mean, it's so many gems for us who are interested in Islamic psychology to benefit from. Thank you so much. Share that quote, sister, in the WhatsApp group later, inshallah.
Inshallah.
When we open up. That's an amazing quote. So it's a khawatir, it's inner dialogue, and that we need to tame it in order for it to not govern us. So maybe we can refine it to something good as well. Amazing. Amazing. And one thought that came to my mind is that connected to this overtly, sexualized society, particularly in the West, is that we, sometimes in response to the hypersexualized societies, specifically in this contemporary era and specifically in the West, we as Muslims, maybe sometimes we adopt a complete silence on matters related to, for instance, intimacy. So we almost, because of the reaction towards a very unhealthy and very nafsani and very sexualized society, we adopt a reaction which is almost complete silence, almost making these subjects a taboo for discussions in both homes and also within the educational system. And I really believe that this leaves a lot of young males and females uninformed in many ways and vulnerable then to distorted notions of intimacy through other resources that are not, in congruence with Qur'an and Sunnah, for instance, through social media, online content, for instance, the rise of, pornography and many other things that creates fitna and zina. So even these type of exposure, if we're not speaking and giving resources according to Quran and Sunnah to our youths, then we're also indirectly opening up for other avenues, because we cannot shut down, these avenues in the realm of our youths. And also specifically in the West, a lot of the education that the schools and the education system are offering with regards to intimacy and sexual education is very liberal, and it's also very much anti-sacred aspects of intimacy, and it also brings about the normalization of intimacy without any ethical standards. Rather, they just speak about protection against diseases rather than protection against walking in the path that distorts your path towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So a lot of this exposure often leads to like a lot of unhealthy attitudes towards relationships. It leads to objectification. It could lead to addiction. It could lead to also distorted, versions and understandings of love, and also the sacred aspect of intimacy aligned with Quran, Sunnah, and Sharia. And as I mentioned before, dear brothers and sisters, this whole Western liberal sexual education brings also an extreme solution to the problems, which also further strengthens the problems of connecting it to sacredness and also connecting intimacy to self-restraint. And it often brings solutions that are solely focusing, as I referred to earlier, on physical protection. For instance, okay, you can live out your desires, but use contraception and condoms, for instance. This is the information they're giving to our youths, which is very problematic. And the solution is, as I referred to now, leave out your desires as long as you take care of your health. So essentially neglecting one's spiritual health, and also, quite frankly, dear brothers and sisters, one's psychological health as well, because the ethical standards is to live out your urges and needs, but do it mindfully. So they never address the importance of what this chapter is speaking about, dear brothers and sisters, which is self-restraint, self-discipline, and also the sacred nature of intimacy, right? So this approach, which is feeded daily, normalizes acting on desires without encouraging some deeper reflection or personal responsibility, and ultimately does not condemn at all the over-sexualized contemporary culture that our youth and also adults are exposed to. Rather, it just wants to reform it a bit, not to change it, because people want to live out the urges at the end of the day. People do not want to be governed by something higher ethically. So what can we, dear brothers and sisters, as Muslims do to counter both the problem and to come up with our own solution? So as part of the rites of passage for males and females, which is part of the Futuwwah tradition, to become a sacred man and sacred woman, how could we prepare through, maybe I was thinking about creating a sexual education according to Qur'an and Sunnah and upon Futuwwah, for instance, as a way to help our youths, and where sisters educate sisters and brothers educate brothers. So men educate males and boys, and women educate females and girls, and that we counter both this taboo, which is a reaction, obviously, of speaking about it, because the society, the modern Western society, is so overtly hypersexualized that there is two problems here: the liberal sexual education and also this hypersexualized society. Any thoughts about this, brothers and sisters? Yes, Brother Thomas, go ahead.
Yes, actually, two things I wanted to mention. In normalizing also sexuality in our communities, this hadith always comes to mind, where some of the companions, they asked to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they asked him about intercourse, and that intercourse within marriage you actually get rewarded for. And they were so amazed that he said this, how can we get rewarded for a thing that gives us so much pleasure? And then he said, of course, you will be punished. Don't you think you will be punished if you did it outside of marriage? So this is really something, it's something natural, and something we should also see as even ibadah, if I'm not mistaken. If it's done in the correct way and in the right environment, only inside the marriage. And then also something I wanted to mention, that last year I was at the Islamic summer camp, and there was a sheikh from England, and he was doing sexual education, and really something without shame. And it was really, I don't know, I only know his first name now, Sheikh Bilal from England. He's from somewhere in England. But this is something very good. Like you said, you also want to do education about sexuality. And then I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
MashaAllah, Brother Thomas. Thank you so much for your excellent remarks. And you're right. MashaAllah, this hadith is beautiful. And even many of our traditional scholars in Tasawwuf, for instance, they spoke about this, that within the institution of marriage between married man and woman, so two spouses, husband and wife, according to Qur'an and Sunnah and Sharia, with the right intention, intimacy can then be ibadah, right? And you can come close, even you can come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through it. If it's done with this intention, obviously, and according to Quran, Sunnah, and sacred law. And this is something that a lot of the scholars mentioned, actually, which is a beautiful thing to say, that this is ibadah, this is worship. Even the annihilation of the nafs could come through this practice, actually. But then our modern society does not educate us to understand this sacred aspect of it. And because, unfortunately, I think, as you said, you guys had an Islamic summer camp. You met this great Sheikh Ustad from UK. He spoke about it in a very educated way. This is exactly what we need to do. We need to be proactive. Instead of letting the liberal notions decide how this education should be governed. Because when it comes to the liberal critique of the hypersexualization, their critique is not to change the society in itself and go to the root problem. They just want to reform it a little bit. Okay, use protection, but live out your urges. That is the solution they're offering through their education that they want to give to the youth. We need to be proactive and say, no, we believe in restraint and we believe in the sacred aspect of it. And we need to bring that type of futuwwah education to that. So I hope all of you, my dear brothers and sisters, later in the WhatsApp group can discuss this, and we will establish a task force within the Futuwwah Academy of Sacred Manhood and Sacred Womanhood to work solidly with this, because this is one of our biggest issues in this contemporary era, to deal with this. Somebody hasn't muted their microphone. If you guys can mute your microphone and only open up when you want to speak, I would really appreciate it. Jazakallah khair. Any other brothers and sisters who would like to share some reflections? Sister Arinola is sharing in the chat. Applying moderation within the laws of Islam will help us to control our desires. If unmarried, we fast, and if married, we stay within the limits of our marriage to meet our desires. Yes, exactly, sister. This is something that also will be mentioned and referred to in this chapter. Sister Kafila is saying the Western liberal sexual education has given room for perversion. Yeah, in many ways, that's true. That's true. Great remarks, Sister Kafila. She further says, it's even worship provided it's done within the limitation of Allah and right intention. Yes, exactly. As you mentioned here, Sister Kafila and Brother Thomas mentioned. Yes, Sister Hadid, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I studied the fiqh and about all of these sexual issues and the marital states, and I never felt shamed or like something wrong. I think the way it's being addressed and talked about in the media is being shameful and being sarcastic, and this is what reduces its value. But in Islam, if it's done in its proper ways, like in marriage and whatnot, then it's a very high and very important thing to do because it's continuation of the society and it's like يعني increasing Muslims and all of these notions يعني. And yeah, and also I think I forgot the second idea, but yeah, this is it. If I remember, I'll put it in that chat.
MashaAllah, Sister Hadid, thank you for your excellent remarks. You said something very important here, continuation of the society. And one of the objectives of Sharia, the maqasid of Sharia, is nasl, lineage, or nasab, children. So that's intimacy can have a profound, effect on our society's health. Because one of the five main objectives that, Imam Ghazali speaks about, Imam al-Shatibi speaks about, is nasl and nasab, right? So alhamdulillah, this is very important, sister. And we tend to forget that today. Actually, there is a crisis in many parts of the world. For instance, in Japan, the general population's age is becoming older and older. So this is their population is quite old, and people tend to live longer. I think the average age there of people is over 80, 90. People can live until the hundreds. Alhamdulillah. But the younger generation who is supposed to take care of the elders, they're fewer than the older generation. And this has created a lot of problems when it comes to, for instance, building the pension system, providing for the elderly, having resources for the elderly, etc. So even there, intimacy is a solution for that. Children, but the problem is that Japan, I love Japan, by the way. I love the tradition of Japan. I love all the martial arts and the sacredness. There's a lot of Futuwwah in the Japanese indigenous culture. I'm not speaking about this modern culture generally, the indigenous culture, the tea ceremonies, martial arts, the honor code of the ninja and the samurai, etc. So there is a lot of futuwwah we can gain from that. Nevertheless, modernity stroke, and now Japan is very heavily capitalistic, like many other societies. It's all about making career, making money, etc. And people don't have time to build families. And this is the case in many parts of the world, including here in Sweden where I live. So you see now less younger people than older people in many societies because society is based upon the health of the society is based upon GPD, which is gross GDP, which is gross domestic product, how much a society, how much a country produces economically, rather than general health and holistic approach, where you can also see like childbirth or procreation is part of the health of a society. This has led to a lot of problems in our society today. And we see it, for instance, in Japan, where they have an issue in providing resources economically and also psychologically and physically to the elderly seniors of the society. Allahu Alam. Sister Hadid is writing in the chat, the society is making it very difficult to marry with all the economic burdens and the buying culture and make it easy to sin and be in a casual relationship without commitment and responsibility. Exactly, Sister Hadid. This is a very good point because we also have the whole notion of that marriage, even within the Islamic framework today, has becoming culturally driven with notions that are not according to Qur'an and Sunnah. Like, for instance, a lot of brothers cannot pay these high amount of mahr that a lot of families are asking. We see that in many Muslim countries. Obviously, mahr is a duty of the man, but the amount and the way you want to boast, as a way to show, like, we are rich or we have financial means, and this leads a lot of unmarried men, for instance, in this society, and women, by the way. So there, as you say, there is so many things, even as Muslims, that we need to rethink, and go back to applying things according to Quran and Sunnah. All right, Sister Arinola, go ahead. You want to say something?
Yes, please. So, I'm a bit worried because I've had instances where we now have younger people who are tending towards same sex. They are supposedly Muslims. You also have people that are married and they've had this agreement that even within the marriage, they're allowed to still have some form of external interactions as long as they put some kind of limitations. And we have also stories where within the marriage, the husband requests that they have threesomes or 4 people at the same time. And I know that from narrations of the life of the Prophet ﷺ, he had specific period that he spent with each of the wives, not having everybody together doing the act. So I don't know if you could share more light on that. Thank
I
you.
think most of these, thank you, sister, for sharing these things. All these things are against Quran and Sunnah. That's just very plain and simple. And I think a lot of these issues that we see, even in our communities, comes from pornographic. I'm a counselor myself, and I deal with a lot of cases where people have a porn addiction, or there's also something called secondary porn addiction, where, for instance, a spouse gets indirectly influenced by another spouse's porn addiction, for instance. So this is quite common. So there is this, porn addiction, which has become a pandemic even in many Muslim communities, unfortunately. And then people tend to sometimes try to justify certain actions, claiming that it's permissible according to Qur'an and Sunnah, which is not. And as Sister Hadith said, there is a whole aspect of fiqh with regards to intimacy in all the four madahib of Ahl Sunnah that we need to follow. So I think this is due to that, and that just because we're Muslims, we're not immune towards influences of distorted, sexual perversions or actions. And a lot of this comes from pornography, but also from an overly hypersexualized society. Even like our movies today that are created, at least in the West, it's very pornographic in many ways. And also all the ads and commercials, etc. There are a couple of good tools that we can utilize to work on this, including counseling, of course. If a person becomes aware that they have this issue, then they can get and seek help through counseling. There's a lot of modalities we can use from an Islamic psychotherapeutic point of view to help these brothers and sisters to come back to a healthy view of intimacy. But we need to speak about it because it's a pandemic, and we need to break the taboo of giving healthy sexual education so that we show the alternative based upon Quran and Sunnah, so that people do not need to go astray because they already get that education that answers a lot of their questions and doubts. When it comes to SSA and same-sex attraction, this is also an issue. This can never be justified according to Quran and Sunnah. This is nothing that is permissible at all. And I think a lot of these, sexual acts or acting upon your sexual desires and distorted visions of intimacy, whether it's to be with several people, simultaneously or whatever, comes a lot from pornography, and that through pornography and through the hypersexualized society, these acts have become normalized, uh, which is a big problem. So, and we can even see that, like this generation is much more, exposed to this than former generations, for instance. So, yeah. Jazakallah khairan for sharing this, sister. Sister Hadid is writing in the chat. Sister Fatima is writing in the chat. Let me see here. Yes, Sister Hadid is writing. This is altering the demographics of societies, and what is our priority is life aligning with Sharia and the maqasid of Sharia. The mahar should match his abilities, not burden him or make it height that the man doesn't think of divorcing since he cannot pay it. Exactly, Sister Hadid. Sister Fatima is writing, I was listening to the podcast where the host invited a counselor. The counselor said that the young men and women come to him saying they want to get married, but their parents wouldn't let them because they think if they get married young, what will people say? Meaning the parents know of the relationship of their children, which are haram, and don't mind them, but are making nikah difficult. I think deal with this problem at a large level. There is a need to change the mindset of parents. Yes, I think a lot of this mindset is just culturally driven, Sister Fatima, in many ways. For instance, you need to have your education set, you need to have proper work, and you need to do your career before you get married. Now, obviously, as a man, you need to have a work to provide for your, family. So that is for sure. But at the same time, why should you be done with your career before you get married? Why can you not get married and also do your career or your studies simultaneously? So this is a mind state that is very foreign for us. This is not how we used to live as Muslims. And even like non-Muslims used to not live like this in the pre-modern era. This modern era almost institutionalized things and brings it into very like rigid stages, which is really not stages that are, it's man-made stages. Like that's why, like for instance, in Sweden, we have the highest population of unmarried women and men in almost the whole world, plus 40 and beyond. So marriage is a natural thing, and it's recommended to marry at the early age, like, this is a recommendation from the Sunnah. So Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Let's see here. Hadil is writing, I think marrying young is needed, but it's need to be guided and they need to learn about nikah, its responsibilities and duties. Yeah, we need good marriage education. Yes, I do like, for instance, pre-marriage counseling. I think this is very important so that People already know each other good enough so that when they get married, they don't get shocked. And that you speak about the difficult things in advance, because I really believe that it's important to share the same, spiritual values, social values, and culturally values. And then, of course, you can still be different. Marriage is the biggest jihad in a sense. And the Prophet ﷺ says that 50% of our religion, our deen, is the marriage. So it's a jihad of compromising, meeting in the middle, not my way or highway, right? So definitely, we need more marriage courses. Sister Hadid is writing, and the fact that the number of wives are limited to 4 is because in Jahiliyyah used to have many wives and it wasn't regulated by the usul of the origin is to have 1 wife. Yes, exactly, sister. And pornography generates money. Sister Fatima's writing, I feel that there is a lot of taboo about such topics, especially in South Asian societies. But I feel like Quran teaches male for males and females for females should guide the younger generation. Exactly. Quran teachers possess the knowledge to help a relationship with fiqh and Quran. Yes, we need teachers, people that are grounded in Quran and Sunnah, they're grounded in Futuwwah and Akhlaq, in different sacred, sciences, tasawwuf, fiqh, to educate the youths. And that's why we are encouraging all of you together, we all, to create a Futuwwah grounded sexual education where men educate boys and males and women educate females and girls. And we will work on that, inshallah. So we will announce that in the WhatsApp group. Thank you, Sister Fatima. Sister Hadid is writing Westernization and toxic postmodernity. Fatima is writing, recently I had developed this mindset that both marriage and career are part of life. None of it is life itself. I feel this needs to be promoted. Yes, it's part of life, but not life in itself. Yeah, good quote. Sister Sophia is writing, addiction in any form is giving into one's desires, which boils down to lack of self-control. What can we do to train people to increase their self-control? This is Futuwwah, Sister Sophia. This is why we're reading this amazing book by Imam Dawud Walid. May Allah preserve him. How can we restrain? How can we break our nafs? How can we refine our character? How can we do tahdib? This is very important topics, and that's why we gathered here to together learn and create modalities for it. Sister Kiran is writing, addiction to games and social media is destroying Muslims and other households. Parents are unable to meet children's emotional needs and setting bad examples in the name of relaxation. Spouses too, yes. So it's not only to restrain your sexual desire, it's also desires at the whole. So gaming addiction we have, right? Drug addictions we have, children not being able to label their emotions. Very important topics indeed, sister. Khair. Sister Kafila, you wanted to add something? Then we can continue to read, inshallah. Go ahead, Sister Kafila.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Actually, what we are currently experiencing is a backslash of the fact that the intense greed, or would I say the intense increase in appetite for materialistic tendency and competition with material things has made it impossible for people, because they have the mindset that when you get married, you have a whole lot of responsibility, and it makes you, you might not be able to actually attain financial, I couldn't say financial freedom, but a better financial status, whereby you have everything you need, or you have at least the basic necessities that you'll be able to make your life relatively comfortable. So the Western orientation, the Western mentality has so much been ingrained into people's mind that they, just like they did in terms of having many children, that when you are married, you need to attain a particular status, a particular financial status or achievement before you can now say you want to get married. And that is why it has increased people's appetite to be able to amass material things before they can get married. More importantly, they made them to feel that marriage is something that gives you this, that makes you to sign away your freedom. So if you are married, you don't have freedom, both male and female. In fact, in the case of the female, it is even worse, because You cannot just make any decision on your own. And everybody wants to feel that, look, I'm in control of my life. I have every say to do whatsoever I like. So making it difficult for people to come together and say, okay, we want to spend the rest of my life with you within the intricacies of Islam. And as such, they just want to divert the attention of the Muslim youth, because they know that when we talk about youth, they are the ones that are going to champion to the next generation what the predecessors are taking, the flag, the baton. So when they use that to bring them away, to deceive them from what is actually the focus of what Islam wants, it is easier for us to derail. And when we derail, we are the ones that Allah has given the mandate to call people to the good and disallow them evil. When we that were to do that, when we lost focus, what else? Everything will be in chaos. And that is what we're experiencing now.
Jazakallah khairan, Sister Kafila, for your excellent remarks. I really appreciate it. Yes, you're right. So much importance here. All right. My suggestion is that we will create a modality for this, inshallah, and sexual education according to Futuwwah. Sister Arinola, with your permission, let's continue reading because we need to read a little bit more, and we will continue the discussions in next part.
I would like to read.
Okay, go ahead, Sister Arinola.
Yeah. So, women are mentioned first among the creations desired by women. Sheikh Hamaddin said regarding this test, women are the most imminent allurement of the world, and the Prophet ﷺ said, there is not a test that comes upon men that brings more harm than women. The fatah's desire for women must be diverted from the blameworthy sexual activity and guided towards fulfilling it in a manner that conforms with the sacred law. Such blameworthy activities include engaging in fornication and fellatio with women who are not wives. Acceptable wives are women who are permissible to marry according to the sacred laws, to the exclusion of polytheists. Moreover, the fatah is prohibited from masturbating, whether he is doing so while fantasizing about women or looking at pornography. Pornography as a category is prohibited in and of itself. Sheikh then mentioned that some of the people of wisdom from the past said, Allah created the angels with intellect without desire. Animals possess desires without intellect. However, man was created with both desire and intellect. So whoever uses this intellect to conquer his desire is better than the angels. But whoever allows his desire to defeat his intellect is lower than the animals.
So let's
The
wait for
fatah.
Sister. Thank you so much, Sister Arinola, for reading in such an excellent way. I really love this quote by Sheikh Dem. I really love it. He says here, Allah created angels with intellect without desire. So the angels, they have the aql, but they don't have the shahwa, right? And then the animals possesses desires without intellect. So the animals just act upon shahwa without any aql. However, man was created with both. So we, as men and women, we have both the shahwa and the aql. That's why we are the best of creation. But we need to balance it, isn't it? So whoever uses their intellect to conquer his desire is better than the angels. So actually, if we conquer our shahwa, we're better than the angels. But whoever allows his desires, his shahwa, to defeat his intellect and aql is lower than the animal. This is so beautiful. And I'm reflecting upon this now. How can we learn from this quote, dear brothers and sisters? And how can we break it down to a futuwwah intervention that uses both cognitive, aqlani, methods and intervention, and nafsani, behavior, methods and interventions? Any thoughts? I was actually thinking here that, when Sheikh Dem is saying angels have intellect without desire, then the intellect represents discipline, right? Decision making, and also adheres to sacred guidance or divine guidance, right? And when Sheikh Ahmed says animals have desires without intellect, then desire, the shahwa, represents impulsivity, compulsion, and also perhaps the pursuit of, this whole aspect of instant gratification, which is a huge problem, by the way. And then when Sheikh Dem is saying man was created with both intellect and desire, aql and shahwa, then we as human beings, we have a unique challenge, dear brothers and sisters. And we also have a great opportunity to harmonize, to balance these two forces so that they become congruent. That the aql controls the shahwa, and the shahwa doesn't control the aql, which is the opposite, right? So using intellect to conquer the desire, so that we can understand that elevation, at least spiritually and psychologically and even physically, comes from mastering shahwa, through disciplining it, jihad al-nafs, tahdib al-akhlaq, so that you're doing things mindfully when you are, engaging with your desire, and that elevates you beyond the angels. That's really beautiful, if we can allow people to think like that, right? And then letting desires overcome intellect makes one lower than the animals, right? So that the deviation, dear brothers and sisters, here can come when acting on your impulses, right? Which also leads to what Sister Sophia writes down in the chat, the absence of self-control, And then you become worse than animals, because animals do not have that intellect, right? And you're not acting upon your intellect. Now, historically, the scholars used to call the human being insan for haywan with mantiq, haywan mantiq, the intellectual animal or the animal with intellect. So that we have that intellect differentiates us from animals, right? And here as a counselor, I can say, and as a therapist, I can say, there's so many things we can do here as part of the modality. And I encourage all of you, my dear beloved brothers and sisters, excellent sisters and brothers, to reflect upon this. Like, for instance, there is a lot of cognitive interventions we can do here to help, the youth and even elders to allow their aql to control their shahwa, for instance. So there's a lot of methods we can take from CBT, like cognitive behavior therapy, as a way to conquer your desires with your mind. For instance, we can do tafakkur, we can do contemplation as a way of working with MBCD, which is mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, for instance, so that when you're, feeling an impulse, you contemplate as a way to observe, for instance, your desires without visualizing them, as a way to know, okay, this triggers me, so I shouldn't do that or see that, and you can have precaution before you act upon that, so that you could, in a sense, control your impulses by understanding what triggers them, and observe them. And then you can counter that with healthy alternatives, according to Qur'an and Sunnah. You can also do cognitive restructuring, so replacing distorted thoughts and desires with sacred beliefs, for instance, that are aligned with Futuwwah. And then from a behavioral point of view, to deal with the nafs and the behavior inclination, you could, for instance, work with changing habits. And that's something that they used to write manuscripts about in the Futuwwah tradition and in the Tasawwuf tradition and in the Akhlaq tradition of Islam as well. And there is like a lot of behavioral intervention in modern psychology, which is quite similar, like, for instance, habit reversal training, where you can replace a negative habit that may have been tied to, let's say, shahwa or desires. For instance, you can speak about overindulgence in food with positive habits that are aligned with Futuwwah or Qur'an and Sunnah. For example, which this chapter speaks about, fasting, So these could be ways for us to help the fata to control desires generally, So I'm just reflecting here, brothers and sisters, because we want to take this reading and do something tangible with it as part of our curriculum development team. Yes, Sister Sophia, you want to say something? Go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. Yes, just as I said in the comment, we can create short stories, and literally what you've just described, Brother Jamaluddin, that we can have all of those elements that you've literally described taking from the CBT and all the other aspects, but we create like a contemporary short stories, like in films, and obviously we can do the halakha and teach them in person one-to-one, but even if we have these stories, because there is a lot of people who will consume passively still a lot of information, and that would be one way to disseminate this, where we would reach a lot of our audiences. I think just combining the two, actually.
MashaAllah, Sister Sophia. That's excellent thoughts. Let's do that, sister. We will love if you can take lead on that, MashaAllah, with your
Oh, I
experience.
don't know about. I'm not the best person to create short stories. I'm sure there are a lot of other
Inshallah. You can be
better
part of
people.
managing it, and then we can create it together. I mean, this whole book is filled with amazing stories, you know. So
Yeah.
we can definitely take some of the stories from this book and visualize it and creating like small infographics or short, you know,
Yeah.
animations. That's amazing. I really agree on that. Thank you so much. And you know, our youths are, you know, as we spoke last week, if I'm not mistaken, that we live in a very visual era. So we need to use visual
Yeah.
tools for sure. That's very important. Thank you, sister. In the chat, Sister Shabina is writing, if young children are watching such type of things, is there so in there, so they are having desires, so we must speak to them as a friend if they have such feelings, so it's better to get married at the right age. Yes, Sister Shabina, exactly. Sister Hadid is writing, I need to leave. Okay. All right, sister. May Allah bless you. So you wrote they have a summit back in 2000. Okay, you're sharing some resources in the chat. That's amazing. Yes, Sister Shifa, go ahead.
I just wanted to add on to just the concept that you introduced about tafakkur. I'm very excited and happy to share that I'm working on a paper where I'm trying to include tafakkur within CBT framework. Not necessarily going on to the mindfulness cognitive therapy. Why? Because it's a very westernized concept. So inshallah, I'm working on Dr. Malik Badri's concept of tafakkur within the
Wow.
CBT framework. And I pray inshallah that it can fit into the Futuwwah as well as help on the title of toolkit, inshallah.
MashaAllah, sister. Please introduce and please use the Futuwwah Academy for it, inshallah. We will love to benefit from your amazing research, inshallah. So we will love to have you with us as part of the curriculum development team. There is a lot of great, yes, Professor Malik Badri's book, Tafakkur Contemplation, is an amazing book. I recommend all of you to read it. Also, as you mentioned, Ibn al-Qayyim has a lot of notions on how to do tafakkur, tadabbur, pondering, and also ittibar, and tadakkur as well. And then there is, we had a lot of lectures in tafakkur actually, Sister Shifa, you can check. So Dr. Samir Mahmoud did an amazing lecture for us with regards to tafakkur and contemplation. So rightfully so, most of the Western mindfulness approach is very much limiting mindfulness to go beyond the nafs. It doesn't have a transcendental notion. So it's not to take you to a higher spiritual intelligence. It's rather still very dunyavi. Nothing wrong with certain practices of it. It doesn't contradict Qur'an and Sunnah. Nevertheless, it doesn't bring you to a higher, you know, spiritual state, which the Islamic tafakkur does. And Islamic tafakkur is not about losing your consciousness, because a lot of the Eastern traditions, like in Buddhism and
Yes.
Taoism and all these traditions, it's about almost losing your conscience.
Mhm.
That's not the case in Islam at all. We need to still be in conscience, but it's to have a higher intelligence, a spiritual awareness, which is the ultimate goal for doing tafakkur and tadabbur. So we pray that you will be successful by the tawfiq of Allah in your amazing research, sister. We will love to support you as Futuwwah Academy and as ISIP, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan, sister. So, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Let's continue the reading, dear sisters and brothers. Who would like to read from the Fatah here in this page 94?
Can I continue?
Yes, go ahead, Sister Adinola.
Okay. Bismillah. The Fatah has no authority to dictate to others how they ought to gather in society, nor does he have the authority to demand how women dress in public. He has the responsibility, however, to take precautionary steps and react when necessary to protect himself from falling into blameworthy sexual conduct, as his sexual desires are the strongest from when he reaches the age of puberty up until he becomes more physically mature in his mid-30s. The
Just,
fatah should
sorry, Sister Adola, just briefly here. Thank you so much for reading. I really find this really important because what Imam Dawud is saying here is something that we really need to internalize and to also disseminate to others, specifically to the youth, but also elders, is that the fatah has no authority to dictate to others how they ought to gather in society, nor does he have the authority to demand how women dress in public. So essentially, sometimes we tend to externalize our struggles and say, you need to dress properly. But in fact, I should not gaze. You should conduct yourself in a way to safeguard your nafs and your health and not project your struggles onto other people. And I think this is a very profound messaging that we need to do. I just wanted to state that it's so good that Imam Dawud Walid, may Allah preserve him, mentioned this in this chapter, because this is something that we can see that sometimes people have their struggles. Let's say some men, and some males might have struggles and, stop gazing on the opposite gender. And then you project your insecurity and your struggle on that person, for instance, and that shouldn't be the case. That's not the path of Futuwwah. So I just wanted to highlight that. Do you guys have any thoughts to share about that? Or else I just wanted to highlight that for us to have in mind as we continue our path. So you can continue, sister. We will discuss that later. You can continue from the fatah here. Should regularly supplicate.
Bismillah. The fatah should regularly supplicate for protection from sexual immorality, patience, and perseverance, turning to Allah for divine support in his struggle. When he has urges arising from his attraction for women, he should immediately seek refuge with Allah from shaitan, as his whispers incite him to act upon what is forbidden. He should also make a habit of waking up from his sleep in the last third of the night to pray tahajjud, seeking divine assistance. The Prophet ﷺ said, fasting is a shield. Fasting is a shield from the corruptions of the world and is a barrier from the punishment of the hereafter. For everything is a gate, and the gate of worship is fasting. The fatah should also make it part of his spiritual routine to fast a minimum of 3 days every month outside of the month of Ramadan. He should fast from the illuminated days of 13th, 14th, and the 15th every month. If his desires are still strong, he should fast these days along with every Monday and Thursday, which are days that the Prophet ﷺ used to fast. The linguistic meaning of fasting is restraint, and fasting helps in restraining behaviors and quietening desires. The Prophet ﷺ said, young people, whoever among you can marry should marry, because it helps him lower his gaze and guard his private parts. And whoever is not able to marry should fast, as fasting diminishes his sexual power. The fatah's fasting, if sincere, will bring him to the true fast, which Seyed Abdul al-Qadir al-Jilani said, is restraint of the spiritual heart from making equals with Allah Most High, and restraint of the innermost self, sir, from his love is a spiritual witness, that's mushahada, of none other than Allah Most High,
Thank you
along
so
with
much, sister.
fasting.
Jazakallah khairan, sister, for reading in such an excellent way, sister. I didn't know that. Appreciate it. MashaAllah, there's so much gem in this chapter. I'm mindful that we have 20 minutes left. So yeah, this is the beauty of our gathering. We just want to continue our excellent conversation. May Allah preserve all of you, dear brothers and sisters. Here, there's so many gems. Fasting is a shield, that's something that we need to utilize here. And I really thought about this, waking up in the last third part of the night to do tahajjud. Could be, of course, there's so much spiritual value in doing qiyam and also praying tahajjud, but also really the sleep research. speaks a lot about this, brothers and sisters, that during the last part of our sleep, we go to the rapid eye movement sleep, the REM sleep. I'm sure you guys have heard this. If you guys are interested in, like, for instance, sleep psychology, you have heard about the different stages of sleep. We have like different stages of sleep, and the rapid eye movement sleep is where we have a lot of dreams, a lot of vivid dreams, including actually sexual dreams. So actually, it's so amazing what the Sunnah has to offer us. Even from a scientific point of view, you can derive so much hikmah and wisdom from it, that actually to wake up the last third part of the night to pray tahajjud actually helps to counteract potential, dreams that could be of sexual nature, for instance. It's really interesting, right? And further, what I would like us to reflect here is the whole linguistic aspect of fasting, which means to restrain, right? The fasting, often when we speak with people generally and with the youth, is okay, let's refrain from food during the holy month of Ramadan, which is of course part of, fasting. Nevertheless, it's so much more, right? It's also to restrain yourself from desires. So my question to all of you, also to reflect upon, Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, rahimullah's notions of true fast, which is to really restrain the spiritual heart from making equals with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And to not connect with anything else or witness anything else than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I was thinking here, how can we give the youth and the fatah in a creative manner a holistic understanding of fasting, which goes beyond just refraining from food, which might be the common understanding a lot of people, and then refer to Abdul Qadir Jilani rahimullah's notion of true fast. How can we also create like a fasting program almost for the youth that encapsulates these thoughts, right? So that we can help the youth, the fatah, to reach, if sincere in their actions, the true fast or the holistic understanding of fasting. Do you guys have any thoughts about that, dear excellent brothers and sisters? Did you raise your hand, Sister Sophia? I might have
Yes.
asked my.
Yes, I did actually. I actually didn't understand the last part about the restraint of spiritual heart, and then the rest of this two lines that completes the thing. And I was going to ask you to explain a bit more, but I think you have sort of kind of explained it. So if you can elaborate a bit more on it.
And what I was thinking about, yeah, of course, sister, I'm happy to do so. I was thinking more like when Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani is saying, like, true fast in a sense is restraint of the spiritual heart from making equals with Allah Azza wa Jal, and restraint of the innermost self, right? From his or her love and spiritual witness of none other than Allah. So essentially, fasting is to not make equal of anything else than your love to Allah, right? That is fasting in a sense, that you witness Allah, that you're connected with Allah and only with Allah. And then I was thinking from the aspect of the holistic understanding of fasting, which is restraint. It's not only to refrain
Yes.
from food, but beyond that. And then I was thinking, how can we create kind of like a fasting intervention almost for the youth, where they can become more holistic, aware of what fasting means and is defined holistically, for instance, That was my thought.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it then brings back to the question I posed earlier: is how do we? One thing is when we can impart knowledge and says, well, we should show self-restraint, but how is the important bit. And then once you become aware, it's to take action. And I think that is the crucial part now. I think that's the new way of learning, I guess, which is going on. Yeah, I think that's, I mean, I'd have to think a bit more on this.
You do so. Sister Sophia, your remarks are always excellent. And we have the WhatsApp group to continue the conversations for sure. We will love your excellent inputs, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan, sister.
Inshallah. Inshallah.
Sister Shabina, you wanted to say something? Go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Yeah, I'm just thinking on those lines which you have just explained, that if we guide the youngsters about what is how to behave and how to perform in this type of situation, like youngsters, they are watching so many things nowadays that they are like to perform like that. For example, if they watch movie, they like to perform as a character, as an actor. So they want to do that. So it's better that we must ask the youngsters that what they are watching and what they are seeing and what they see in that thing, what that inspired them. It's better to talk and ask them, because I've seen so many children are they are just involved in watching movies, watching dramas and watching all that things that is not for them, because their family are sitting and they are involved in all these things. So it's better not to watch all these things, or it's better not to have that television at home, only for the productive work, only to know and teach them good things if we are having television in our house. And secondly, as the reading session is going on, it describe a lot about how the women's, the girls should dress. That thing should we teach at home. If we are not teaching that thing, and they are just asking that we want this type of dresses, jeans and mm, uh, or whatever, that skinny way to wear, that is not a good dress up to wear. That is taking the sign of going the direction which is not commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Only dress simple. And ladies also has been described that not use perfume when you are going out. So many things, it's clear in Quran and Sunnah. Then also we are just searching and we are just crawling here and there to know, to get the knowledge. If we Surah Nisa, everything is there for the woman. If we read that Surah Nisa carefully, step by step, all the things has been described, and Surah Noor is also there. So we are having so many things. Then also we are confused what to do and what not to do. So because society, if we go towards that society, what society wants and what society is doing, so we are going in wrong direction. Sorry, we have to choose the correct path. We have to see that correct thing, so that inshallah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will uh, after this world we will enter Jannah, inshallah, all of us. May Allah grant.
Inshallah. Ameen, ameen, Ya Rabbil Alameen, ameen. Jazakallah khairan, Sister Shabina, for your excellent remarks. And I agree, we need to work with dress codes, and this is part of Futuwwah. We need to have Futuwwah dress code both for men and for women, for sure, according to Qur'an and Sunnah. Definitely. And there is a holistic understanding when it comes to Futuwwah that we're now learning by reading this amazing book. And may Allah preserve all of our scholars in the path who have given us so much resources, honestly, to learn from. So barakallahu fiki, sister. I appreciate your inputs indeed. All right. So let's continue the reading. Let's start from along with fasting. Somebody who would like to read?
Can I?
Yes. Go ahead, Sister Shabina. Go ahead.
Along with fasting, the Fatah should control his eating habits outside of fasting hours, as doing so when he is not fasting will also as assist him in taming his sexual desires. One of the step of the sexual
Spiritual.
spiritual path of the seeker, according to Sheikh Uthman ibn Fudi radiallahu ta'ala anhu is to be hungry, not eating except in accordance with one's necessary measure. Being in a state of slight hunger is the opposite of being full, and eating until one is stuffed is physically and spiritually unhealthy. The Prophet ﷺ said, the believers eats with one intestine while the disbelievers eats with 7 intestines. The Fatah should also avoid regularly eating red meat, especially beef, as consistent consumption of it can increase desire with him.
Jazakallah khairan, Sister Shabina, for reading in such an excellent way. MashaAllah. Here it's very interesting because we need to speak about eating habits as well. This is the whole holistic understanding of Futuwwah, dear brothers and sisters, right? So Imam says, along with fasting, the fatah should control his eating habits outside of the fasting hours, right? And doing so when he is not fasting will also assist him in taming his sexual desires. So there's a connection between eating too much and sexual desires and desires as a whole. So I would like us to elaborate more here. What is the connection, for instance, between the fast food, pandemic, fast food, fast burgers, fast pizza, fast food, right? And sugary things, fizzy drinks, and also to just eat so much carbs. How does this affect one's desires? And actually, this could also prime our brain and our brain's reward system, dear brothers and sisters, because sugar is a drug in the sense that it triggers a lot of the reward systems in our brain, and it, induces less self-control and more, acting on our desires because it's triggering our reward systems neurologically. So, fast food, sugary items, and excessive carbs could prime these parts of our brain's reward system by, for instance, triggering dopamine surgery. That's really interesting. It surges a lot of dopamine when we are eating too much, specifically the sugar in the food, and it almost become like an addictive substance, right? And I know that a lot of people that are going through depression, they tend to do binge eating, for instance, as a way to cope with their depression. And when these parts of the brain are overactive, this makes it much more difficult to conquer, your self-control, and it also heightens your sexual desires. So how should we reflect upon food and diet in the path of Futuwwah as a way to control our desires? Any thoughts, dear brothers and sisters? For instance, like I notice sometimes, at least here where I live, a lot of young males and females, they're drinking like these energy drinks every day. To drink like an energy drink in the age of 10, 11, that destroys your, brain's development, because there's so much toxic, elements within these energy drinks. Yes, Sister Sophia, go ahead.
Yes, so I think it once again boils down to just culture, and you look at so your friends doing eating certain things, or there's things being advertised in terms of cakes and these drinks and so on. And again, it boils down to self-control and controlling on your desires and being aware of this. And we have to create this counterculture, because this is the thing. We talk about hypersexualized society where you're bombarded with this information. The same thing with advertising. You're bombarded with all these tempting foods, and there's a certain ethos that they create, again, when they're doing an advert, maybe for a chocolate, saying, well, look, this is the last, but I'm going to take it. It's that sort of message, the subliminal message that people are bombarded with. We are in this situation, and we got to look at this holistically and say, well, I mean, my thing comes around again. It's just about developing a counter narrative to this, because I mean, I'll give you my own example. My own family, my children, some of them, especially the boys, they love taking this drink. And I tell them often enough, and I mean, I'm the prime example. I mean, I'm creating these courses where we don't waste, we are mindful of the plastic that gets used in these things. But it just goes in one ear and out the other. And they're not teenagers anymore, but they don't listen. And I'm like, how do I get through to them? Like, it's bad for your health, it's bad for the economy, you're bad for your finances, it's bad for the environment, but they still just don't listen. And the fact is, it is being, you go to the petrol station, you go to the corner shop, the food is there in front of you. You'll just buy it. It's tempting. And the whole then comes to just being informed as to, look, you're being taken for a ride here. It's about that message that we need to come across, and it's us. And I think I see a lot around here, especially with these ISIP groups, where you put emphasis on, oh, parents need to do this, parents need to do that. I mean, in my whole example, I'm like like I said, I constantly tell them, and my students that I teach as well. But the thing is so overwhelming. One voice or two voice of an educator or a parent, it's just gonna sort of go over them. It's a wave, it's we live in this environment where we're constantly bombarded, and that's my concern, is that we need to just create a counter to this, and just put it into action, really.
Yeah, that's so important. And I agree with you, sister. And we need to practice what we preach as adults as well, for sure.
Yeah.
It's so important, and we need to show the alternative of healthy eating. It's so important, and we're, as you say, bombarded by advertisements of advertising this,
And their friends, if their friends are, and if their friends are having it, it's like as a parent, you can say whatever, but the friends are having a greater influence than the parents. So it's a bit tricky.
Yeah, of course. There's no easy solution here. We need to understand things psychologically, sociologically. That's why part of Futuwwah Suhbah, that the youths have good friends, because each friend is a mirror of one another, as the prophetic statement is saying. Jazakallah khair, sister, for sharing your concerns and also your own experience as a mother. MashaAllah, may Allah preserve you. Sister Arinola, please go ahead. You wanted to share something? Or you just you stopped raising your hand. Okay.
Hello?
Sister Shabina, you want to say something?
Yeah, my husband want to speak something about this.
Yes, of course. What is your name, brother?
Yeah, I'm Dr. Shahab.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Shahab. Nice to speak with you, doctor, and honored to have you with us.
Yes, actually, she's the one who attends this session, but there is something which we've experienced as parents. So see, this is part of consumption is very both production, consumption. These are the two important things that we do as humans. So consumption is definitely affects how we think and how we see things. What we consume, actually, a lot of time it has huge impact on how it impacts our thinking process. Now, one thing actually that drew my attention is that there's something mentioned that to eat beef in limited quantity and stuff like that. I think I was especially beef inconsistent. Yeah, it affects the it kind of increased desires within the youngsters or something. I think with due respect to this, youngsters, one thing that they have to be in, like every youngster must be doing some rigorous sports. It's like a medicine for them. So when they are in sports, they automatically get disciplined. And whatever they consume, number one, they will not consume beyond a limit, because they know that they are in sports. They get more concerned about their physical well-being. Secondly, whatever they consume, it gets it goes into the it consumed well, so it does not actually uh, because their negative energy is getting released through their sports activities. They're sweating it out and other things. So whatever they're consuming is actually getting absorbed in the body in a healthy manner, in a systematic manner. Secondly, most of the time, youngsters, yes, in a lot of regions in the world, they have a very indisciplined lifestyle. Like they are not into sports. At the same time, parents, they are not into any kind of. There's no culture within the family for sports or physical activity, which is again part of sunnah. This is amana. Your body is amana, so we are supposed to take care of it as amana. So that kind of thought, when we like for a youngster, especially teenagers, if you keep talking, that may not really work most of the time. But how parents put it in front of them, number one, they have to first, if it's not working out through talking, they should start practicing it. They should get into some sport, some activity, no matter what the age is. You can always do some of the other physical activity and create an environment or culture of health and well-being. I think that way, when you create the culture, it automatically they get into the mindset, especially interact with their friends also. Don't allow them to just interacting with their friends individually. Call them for dinner, for meal at home, so that that it creates a very different environment. You are actually now at a very different, you are creating a very different kind of wavelength between your kid and his friends or her friends. So I think there are a couple of things that if they do some changes, parents would have an easy time in terms of how their kids manage their own physical well-being and their eating habits. So culture is important for sports or for some exercise daily, plus interacting with. So if I put it this way, uh, interacting with their friends. That is, I think, one of the things that the parents can do. Call them for dinner, for meal, and prepare some nice food, healthy food for them. And then while offering them food, you can talk about the benefits of eating this instead of eating something which is junk or which is not healthy. Second thing is the amana part. They should say that our bodies are amana. It's not our. It's a trust, so we cannot
Exactly.
waste it by doing things which are not. And thirdly, create a culture for health, physical well-being at home. Parents may start doing some physical exercise if they've not done in their life before when they were young. A lot of parents, they don't, but those who do, they continue even when they are old. So they can. Third thing they can do is to create some kind of physical routine for themselves, physical fitness routine for themselves, and that will definitely have positive impact on the kids. And keep interacting with them, talking to them about it, because if these kids have seen it since they were small kids, it's a little difficult for them to really understand that when we were so small, everyone was bringing soft drinks and burgers and everything. No one ever said anything, but now all of a sudden people are getting concerned about it. So for them it's kind of difficult to digest initially. But
Yeah.
yes, there are few things, if it is done on a regular basis, I'm sure building confidence with their friends is an important way to. So I think it's a quick or
MashaAllah.
yeah.
MashaAllah. Jazakallah khairan, Doctor, for your excellent remarks. And please join us more. We would love to hear your inputs and remarks, mashallah. I'm very glad to have you
Inshallah,
with
sure.
us, dear doctor. You're so right. We need to work pedagogically with the youths. What you're speaking about is so important. And what you're speaking about is, one, practice what you preach. Second, it's thematical. We call it thematic pedagogy. So it's almost like you're not only studying it theoretically, you're applying it. you're applying the theory. So by eating with the children, you can then discuss the healthy benefits of eating like healthy. Or if you start by doing some sunnah disciplines, then you can also then speak about the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. So you're, as you say, you're utilizing all of your senses for knowledge inquiry, both your jasad, your body, and then your intellect and your mind and your aql as well. And this is part of the Futuwwah curriculum and the Futuwwah pedagogy, by the way, where we really recommend that we build the curriculum according to the 5 elements of Futuwwah, which we mentioned, referred to many times in the study circle, which is sunnah disciplines, craftsmanship, which is to work with your hands and your body, and then ilm is to work with your mind, but to integrate it with your body, and ultimately also with khidmah and also with adab. And as you say, our bodies are an amana, and we cannot take it for granted. It's not a machine. It's an organic vessel that we need to be mindful of, and in that also take care of it and nurture it. It's so amazing what you said, Doctor, and I really appreciate all of your inputs. Brothers and sisters, we're a little bit over time, but I really want us to read some parts of this. So I will stay here. Whoever can continue will continue with me. All of you who cannot continue, I totally understand. I'm always mindful of time. That's part of Futuwwah, but because this chapter is so important and we're actually building our curricula based upon reading each chapter every week, I just want to continue some of the reading. Also, for those who are not attending physically today here, but will listen to the recording afterwards on our YouTube channel, I would like to read a little bit more. So just so you guys know, there's no problems at all if you guys need to leave, because I know you have so many other commitments. May Allah preserve you and may Allah bless you for giving out of your precious time to your brothers and sisters. I will read here just for us to come to a point where we can finalize the reading for today. So
One small suggestion, I mean, quick in 10 seconds.
yes, go ahead, brother.
Actually, I think it's a very important thing, and if it's possible, if one of the participants or the institution, if you can create a group, where it's basically titled as health and family.
Health and family. Okay.
That's it. So that's going to continue. That will interact. It's going to be all about health.
Yes. That's a
So
great thought. We will do it,
yeah.
inshallah. I mean, within the Futuwwah Academy, we can do it. Within the ISIP, the International Students of Islamic Psychology, we can do it. We have a lot of different task forces. So this is an amazing idea. So inshallah, we will utilize it, and then you can be with us, inshallah, doctor. That will be
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jazakallah.
Jazakallah khairan. So Sister Shabina, if your husband is not part of the WhatsApp group for the study circle, please add him to it so that we can have him with us as well, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan, dear doctor. An honor to have you with us. So I will read from here. So Allah Azza wa Jal offers advice on this topic in the 30th verse of Surah Al-Nur. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Say, O Prophet, to the believing men to lower their gazes and protect their private parts. That is pure for them. Surely Allah is well aware of what they do." Commenting on this, Imam Jafar al-Sadiq stated that lowering the gaze concerns anyone or anything that is forbidden. Right? So lowering your gaze is concerning with everything that is forbidden. Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba, may Allah sanctify his spirit, said that in relationship to this verse, quote, "The eye should not gaze to a thing that is forbidden. Of course not. The gaze should be lowered away from it, being respectful." So lowering your gaze is to have respect towards others or towards the object that you're gazing towards, etc. Right? Then it is narrated by Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu that his brother Al-Fadl ibn Abbas rode behind the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam on the back portion of his she-camel on the day of Al-Nahr, the 10th of Dhul Al-Hijjah during Hajj. And Al-Fadl was a handsome young man. The Prophet stopped to give the people verdicts. In the meantime, a beautiful young lady from the tribe of Katam came asking a verdict of Allah's messenger. Al-Fadl started looking at her as her beauty astounded him. The Prophet looked behind while Al-Fadl was looking at her, so the Prophet held out his hand backwards and caught the chin of Al-Fadl, turning his face so he could not gaze at her. She said, "O Allah's messenger, the obligation of performing Hajj enjoined by Allah on his worshippers has become compulsory on my father, who is an old man and who cannot sit firmly on the riding animal. Will it be sufficient that I perform Hajj on his behalf?" He replied, "Yes." so much knowledge to take from this hadith, dear brothers and sisters. Let's reflect upon it further, but let's read a little bit more. So the Prophet ﷺ did not shun the young lady from asking the question, nor did he instruct her to use her hand to cover up the beauty of her face from Al-Fadl radiallahu anhu. Instead, he taught his younger cousin the importance of lowering his gaze by literally turning his face away from her. This story should serve as a reminder for the fata to lower his gaze and guard his chastity, as the eyes are gateways to the soul. Brothers and sisters, this is really, really astonishing hadith. It's so much knowledge we can acquire from this, and the way that we give tarbiyah to others, in the way that we do not put the blame on the person that is the object of the gazing, rather giving the tarbiyah, but at the same time not to make it uncomfortable for the person who is being gazed at. So the Prophet is giving tarbiyah to his cousin, do not gaze, turning his chin around, but he's doing it while staring, while speaking with the young lady who he is giving fatwa to. So he's still focusing on the young lady, showing his respect, doesn't want her to feel uncomfortable, doesn't say to her to change her position or cover her face. Rather, he is indirectly instructing his cousin to not gaze. It's such an amazing pedagogical way that the Prophet ﷺ is handling this, right? So if we reflect on the hadith of when Fadl ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu is riding behind the Prophet ﷺ here, what can we reflect upon? What can we learn in the actions when it comes to giving tarbiyah to others, to giving guidance to others? One, the Prophet was giving a verdict to the lady, right? Al-Fadl was gazing at her, right? The Prophet ﷺ noticed this, but did not stop giving the verdict to the lady. So he was still continuing his action in bringing comfort to the lady so that the lady didn't feel ashamed, right? He instead held out his hand backwards and caught the chin of his cousin and turned his face away. The Prophet ﷺ did not shun the lady, right, from asking the question. He did not instruct the lady to cover her face. Instead, the Prophet ﷺ taught his cousin the importance of lowering his gaze. So this is an amazing story, and we have so much to benefit from this story. And I really think that this is the pedagogical framework that we need to use when it comes to instill the path of Futuwwah amongst males and, of course, females as well. All right, let me continue the reading a little bit. Sister Arinola, yes, you're raising your hand. Any thoughts with regards to this?
Yes. Assalamualaikum. Just wanted to comment that for women are seen as one of the most vulnerable before children, and even our voice is seen as part of our aura. And you find in some certain situations that they even say that women shouldn't talk. They don't have a voice. And from the narration you just given now, the Prophet ﷺ at least allowed the woman to express herself and not reprimanding her, despite the fact that she's a woman. But in doing that, he also made sure that he spoke to his nephew, his cousin, that, hey, you also need to lower your gaze. Yes, she's a woman. You shouldn't look more than necessary. So I believe that creates a balance such that in society we understand that no, the women shouldn't always be shut down and asked to not express themselves, especially when there are instances where there's trouble or there's something that needs to be resolved. And then we keep encouraging the males, thereby indirectly the women are being disadvantaged. So I think it's a good way of trying to make sure that all issues are addressed.
MashaAllah, sister. Thank you so much for your excellent inputs. I agree, MashaAllah. And I think this whole chapter gives us a lot of great reminders of that we all are accountable towards our actions first and foremost. We cannot just put the reasoning behind the problem, let's say, of sexual desires or gazing or fasting from other aspects than just food on a particular gender or a particular person, on the woman or the man. Rather, we all have a responsibility. And the Prophet is really instructing us in how we should engage when it comes to the way we give tarbiyah to others, the way we give advice to others, the way we work with our inner selves and our struggles. Sister Kafila, I will read a little bit more because I'm mindful of the time, and just please keep your hand raised and we will bring you in, inshallah. So here we're going to go to a little bit about music, and I think this is also very important because today we have a pandemic of a lot of music that is, representing lyrics that brings a lot of fitna into the forefront. So Imam Dawud says, the fatah must also guard his ears, which are likewise gateways to the soul and can incite passions. He is to refrain from listening to music that is explicitly and implicitly has lyrics pertaining to sexual content. Much of today's music in the West, especially rap music, references sex as a purely animalistic level. I heard Imam Walid Muhammad, rahimullah, say that such music reduces people to acting like dogs. Dogs being shameless animals who publicly copulate with other dogs in front of the people, unlike cats who do not do so. The fatah should also avoid unnecessary phone conversations with women whose voices could arouse his desires. It is up to him to guard his own soul, not to blame women for who they are or who they sound. How they sound. This is very interesting, dear brothers and sisters. One, as Sister Arinola also referred to, the voice of the women is her aura, indeed, and we need to be careful as men with regards to when, who, and in which way we speak and listen to voices of the opposite gender. And there is fiqh with regards to ikhtilat, gender mixing, and we can go through that a little bit. There's some portions of this chapter where we can speak about gender mixing. Nevertheless, also the music, the type of music, the themes that are promoted, which is very anti-Futuwwah themes, to be quite honest, So how shall we deal with this exposure of music that is really disseminating notions that are not congruent with Futuwwah? And we know that a lot of these artists have millions of viewers and followers. So how shall we deal with this exposure? And I am actually myself, before I consider myself a revert to Islam. So when I reverted back, practicing Islam more holistically 10 years ago, I left. I used to be a hip hop artist back in the days. I'm quite open with it. And I still use the rap today without the instruments as nasheeds, as a way to bring youths to Futuwwah. So the tool in itself and the poetry, I'm not against. And my teachers have even given me ijazah to do so, to utilize these experience that I have. And we've been reflecting a lot about creating Futuwwah raps and Futuwwah nasheeds, actually, because the youths, they can benefit from listening to sacred knowledge with tools and methods that they can relate to. And actually, in the traditional Futuwwah guilds, dear excellent brothers and sisters, poetry used to be the rap of their generation. All the youths used to listen poetry back in the days. And hip hop and rap is poetry with a rhythm, right? So rap stands for rhythm and poetry. So essentially, they disseminated the sacred knowledge of Futuwwah through messaging methods that the youths of their generation and their contemporary era could relate to, which was poetry. Today, the tools and the methods that the youth can relate to is, for instance, hip hop and rap. But of course, we will do it according to Qur'an and Sunnah, and utilizing the messaging of Futuwwah and utilizing nasheeds. So what I'm bringing into forefront is the following. How can we deal with this exposure of this unhealthy music, which is disseminating themes that are very contradicting Futuwwah? And how can we bring about healthy alternatives to the youths? Maybe we can create a list on our Futuwwah Study Circle of great nasheeds or nasheed artists that we can disseminate to the youths to listen to. And I'm happy to share some of my work as well in the near future. Any thoughts, brothers and sisters, with regards to this? Yes, Sister Kafila, you raised your hand. Maybe you want to answer some other question, but please go ahead.
Yes, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. First of all, I want to talk about the women because in some circles of scholars, they believe women are not supposed to talk at all, so to say, because they believe their voice is power. But I know in the Sirah that we have a whole lot of women talking in general public, even not in a private setting, so to say. What I know is that we don't allow intermingling, so to say, as in physical, in such a way that we now go in and on into one another. But in a situation whereby a woman has to express ourselves, express our feeling in a gathering of both sexes, I'm not so sure it's not Islamic. I don't know, because I just like what you have just said, I mean, what we have just read now, whereby the woman was asking the Prophet ﷺ and even there was a situation of Umar, radiallahu anhu, who was talking then, and a woman, Khawla, tried to, I mean, counter what he said when it comes to mahar for a woman in terms of marriage, how much dowry a woman should collect. She actually countered him in a public session. So that aspect of women not talking in the public, some people are taking it to a very, I mean, to an extreme, so to say, such that women are now, any woman who wants to talk in the public feels too shy to express herself, and at the end of the day, she might even do something that is contrary to what Islam wants. And in some situations where we have marital issues or dissension that can actually make things go worse. Then in terms of the music, I know because I have youngsters, I have my children, I have a 20-year-old boy, that's my eldest. They listen to the so-called Marizane, I can't remember his name very well, but I know he's a Marizane.
Yes, he's a great artist. I know him, yeah.
Yes.
He's from Sweden, actually.
And this guy, when I eventually got to some of his pages on, I saw that he uses instrument, unlike Cat Stevens, Yusuf Islam, who uses something different that is very Islamic, so to say, to bring out his nasheed. Then being a student of knowledge too, on my own, I know of some poetries written by scholars that we can use the translation if we can't have it in Arabic because of the language of people, whereby we can put them across in the rap form or whatever goes along with people, such that it will give them wisdom. It will give them an insight into what life is really, other than all this lewdness that is being propagated by these. Even though Marizane's music, to an extent, has some, like a kind of commendation and whatever for the Prophet ﷺ and Islam, but because he has used instruments, vocals for it, it makes it off what it should be. It has really rendered whatever he is saying, because people don't really listen to it at times. They just listen to the beat. And that is just one aspect that I want to comment on.
Jazakallah khairan, sister. Appreciate it. I'm not going to go into the fiqh of instruments. I'm not a faqih. I know there is some ikhtilaf in that, sister. Nevertheless, I agree with a lot of the things you're saying with regards to women speaking publicly. Obviously, what Imam Dawud is saying here is the unnecessary phone conversations between man and woman. He's not referring to women speaking publicly. Obviously, as Futuwwah Academy of Sacred Manhood and Sacred Womanhood, we appreciate all of our sisters, and we do believe that for the sake of Allah, with right intention, women can lead a lot of the efforts of the Ummah when it comes to education, curriculum development, research. So we trust our sisters, we appreciate our sisters, and we support our sisters. So definitely, as also we saw in the hadith, with the young lady was asking for verdicts from the Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet never said to the woman to never speak. So, and we know that one of our greatest mother of the believers, Sayyidina Aisha radiallahu anha, was one of the greatest alima and scholars who shared a lot of the hadith that we are studying today. So definitely there is a great space and place for sisters and women to disseminate knowledge with their voices and with their minds, for sure. So some of the inputs we're hearing about different things, I think, is really cultural notions that has nothing to do with Qur'an and Sunnah. But I let the scholars and the fuqaha to speak about the fiqh of music and instruments. I would say that there is a lot of great lyrics in the things that Cat Stevens, Yusuf Islam, or Maher Zaid, or Sami Yusuf, or Dean Squad, even, that the youths are listening to. There is a lot of great nasheeds and alternatives. And Sister Zainab Ahmed is writing in the chat, how can we access Futuwwah related poetry and nasheed? So we should do a list inshallah, in our Futuwwah Study Circle group, where we add all the great nasheeds and the poetry. Sister Arinola said something very amazing, that we can take traditional poetry that a lot of our traditional scholars have written and perhaps disseminate it in poetry versions or rap versions or nasheeds versions, right? So I think that is a great thing to do. So let's create those lists so that we can give our youths healthy alternatives and that we can create our own healthy Futuwwah alternatives also when it comes to poetry, nasheeds, and raps. And ultimately, when it comes to instruments, I let the fuqaha discuss that because I don't feel like I'm knowledgeable enough to have any opinion on that. Allahu alam. But I do agree with Sister Arinola, we need healthy alternatives. And as Imam Dawud says, a lot of the modern music is disseminated. Besides the fiqh of music, which is that the beats are not according to Qur'an and Sunnah. We use the duf or the daf or other things that are acceptable according to the four madahib of Ahl al-Sunnah. It's not only the beats as such or the rhythm, it's also the content and the messaging of the tunes, which is themes and topics that are very much taking the youth astray from the sacred path of Futuwwah. Khair. We will end now. I would say just that there is a lot of great things here with regards to also mixing, gender mixing and ikhtilat that we can speak about. So for instance, Imam says the fatah is also obliged to completely avoid compromising situation with women who are not his wives that are lawful for him in marriage. The Prophet ﷺ said, no man should be alone with a woman except a close family member who is unlawful for him in marriage. He also warned the believers, saying, no man is alone with a woman except the shaitan is the third present. Even if a woman has a young child present, the fatah should still not be behind closed doors with her, although they technically are not alone. So here, Imam is giving us the advice, yes, we can work together, we can do things together, but according to Qur'an and Sunnah. So in a closed door, man and woman that are not married or they're not, they're not family or have blood ties, then you cannot be in that room together, because then shaitan becomes the third person, which is the prophetic third present, which is the prophetic statement. It doesn't mean that we cannot work with each other. It doesn't mean that we cannot do things together, but it should be according to Sharia, obviously. And that's why in the Futuwwah Academy, we have the sacred manhood and sacred womanhood. We will do some things where women will work for themselves and men will work for themselves, but then like online gatherings and other gatherings, we can work together, but obviously we will still have that gender segregation in place as well, according to Quran and Sunnah. So it's a lot of ways we can work together. Obviously, Quran and Sunnah allows that, but we need to do it mindfully, right? So there's a lot of things here that we can learn and benefit from. So essentially, just to end, there is importance in teaching the youths also the fiqh of ikhtilat and gender mixing. Ikhtilat is permissible, for instance, in certain situations where there is a legitimate need for it, such as on workplaces, marketplaces, educational institutions, and public gathering, as long as Islamic guidance and guidelines of, how we sit, where we sit, women sit for themselves, men sit for themselves, for instance, and also the modesty aspect, haya is in place. So this is something that is permissible, but we need to be very mindful. And there is a lot of examples that I have been taught from my teachers with regards to the Prophet's time, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where men and women they perform Hajj simultaneously, prayers at the mosque, and participating in social activities, but not in the liberal way. It's always Sharia in place when it comes to this, and we should always speak to our righteous teachers and the fuqaha for this. So what is the permissible ikhtilat is something we can discuss, because when we want to work with young boys and girls, we need to already teach them when they come to the age of, bulugh, that we need to reflect upon ikhtilat, and we cannot just have free gender mixing the way that we see in the West. That's not the way we should teach in the path of Futuwwah. We need to be mindful about these things and know what is permissible ikhtilat and what is not permissible ikhtilat. So, for instance, both genders needs to adhere to Islamic dress codes when it comes to permissible ikhtilat, avoid seclusion and khalwa, where a man and a woman are alone in a private or secluded place, maintain respectful and modest interactions, for instance, that's important, and ensure the environment is free from inappropriate behavior or speech. Now, what is prohibit ikhtilat? it becomes impermissible when it involves inappropriate behavior, lack of modesty, or situation that leads to temptation or haram. For instance, being in seclusion, where the Prophet ﷺ said that the third present will be shaitan. So these are really things that are fundamental that we need to reflect upon, dear excellent brothers and sisters, learn from each other's experiences. Then we have cultural notions that are congruent with Qur'an and Sunnah that we can also adhere to, but we also have cultural situations which is not according to Qur'an and Sunnah that we can refrain from. So Qur'an and Sunnah is our benchmark, Sharia is our benchmark, and that is what the whole Futuwwah path is based upon. Sister Zainab is writing specifically, I feel difficult at my workplace to live the lift and go by stair puts the other person in an uncomfortable position. Yes, sister, this is the same situation in the West. So we need to also be mindful of whether we're minorities in a non-Muslim country or not. For instance, in France, they're now bringing hijab bans to women that are working as civil servants within, governmental institution, which is really a lack of respect. It's Islamophobia, and it's also anti-Muslim sentiments. So we need to do advocacy for these type of anti-Muslim sentiments. But of course, the situation for a Muslim man or woman in the West is much more difficult than in a Muslim majority society, where it's quite normal that the whole society and the interactions and the institutions are built upon Sharia and Quran and Sunnah. But even in Muslim countries, we see a lot of secular notions being normalized. So we need to be mindful of this, obviously, and we shouldn't be too hard on ourselves, and at the same time do our best to follow Quran and Sunnah. And there is both permissible and prohibited ikhtilat as well that we can reflect upon and ask the fuqaha for more guidance, inshallah. But the path of Futuwwah, just to finalize, is a path that is filled with a lot of gems, where we can learn a lot by also reflecting upon how do we teach ikhtilat to young boys and girls. When the West and the secular notions just says free mixing everywhere, we should actually, in a pedagogical way, disseminate why free mixing is problematic and what that could turn to, both basing it upon the Sunnah, the Quran, but also from personal life experience, Sister Kiran is writing, some people will also frown upon virtual mingling of the different genders. Now, virtual mingling, what is the aspect of that, sister? That is something. Like, for instance, here we have both brothers and sisters, but we're studying something to learn with each other. So that's nothing wrong. So that's at least what my teachers have taught me. So that's nothing wrong when we're doing something for the sake of coming closer to Allah according to Quran and Sunnah. I think virtually there is a little bit easier ways to work together. And of course, if it's offline, then we need to follow Quran and Sunnah. Even then, there's ways where, you can do joint activities for brothers and sisters according to Quran and Sunnah. Exactly. Actions are judged by intentions. Exactly, Sister Kiran. So our intention here is to learn. We're not privately sitting here chit-chatting with one another. If we're writing something, it's because we're going to do some work together. So within the ISIP, we work together as brothers and sisters according to Quran and Sunnah. But the intention is always to please Allah and to do khidmah, to benefit and support and empower our ummah and our brothers and sisters all over the world. And if you have that intention, then of course we can work together, inshallah. But of course, according to Quran and Sunnah. There are virtual meeting mingling where leaveness is shared. Yeah. I mean, it depends on which virtual meeting, sister. It could be virtual meetings where there is a lot of fitna. So we're speaking about virtual meetings for the sake of Allah, and of course we will always be mindful of Quran and Sunnah as much as possible. All right, dear brothers and sisters, we will end this session now today. I want to thank you all for your inputs. This whole aspect of gender mixing, actually, brothers.